All right, let's just step right out of the bright daylight and drop straight into the gritty, rain-soaked mystery of Ray Hughes' neo-noir thriller Dead Man's Hand. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unraveling a story where organized crime, a literal shadow government, and some truly impossible choices all violently collide. Now, to really get this story, we've got to talk about that title first, The Dead Man's Hand. It isn't just a poker term, it's the core metaphor for the whole entire narrative. Historically tied to Wild Bill Hickok, we're talking about a hand with two aces and two eights. It's basically synonymous with inevitability, with fate. It's a hand that leads to death, no matter how good of a player you are. And honestly, this is the perfect setup for the inescapable trap our protagonist is about to walk right into. It's an impossible hand. You literally cannot win no matter how perfectly you play your cards. And man, the stage that gets set for this fateful hand is just incredible. The text paints this super vivid picture. The neon sign outside Mickey's Diner buzzed like a dying wasp, casting red shadows across the wet pavement that looked like blood diluted in rainwater. It just perfectly captures that desolate, moody vibe of Barstow, California back in 1958. It's a place of total exile. And that is exactly where we find our main guy, a completely broken man, sitting in the desert nursing a cold coffee, just kind of waiting for a reason to exist. Part 1. A Broken Private Eye. Jack Malone's exile. So Jack Malone's reality, it is incredibly bleak. He's a disgraced former LAPD cop. His PI license is suspended after this botched federal case in '56 called the Kellerman Affair, and he is essentially radioactive in LA, pretty much drinking himself to death in the desert. But then, this mysterious, wealthy blonde who calls herself Carmen Vega slides into his diner booth. She offers him $5,000, which, by the way, was serious money back then, to look into the murder of her sister Dolores. Now, the local cops, they completely wrote it off as just some random desert robbery. But there's $50,000 missing from a safety deposit box, and it directly connects to a paroled grifter named Tommy Kellerman, a guy Jack actually tangled with in his past. The big takeaway here is that Jack is desperate for redemption. And because he's so hungry for it, he swallows the bait. Section 2. The Casino Conspiracy. Following the Money. Once Jack starts digging, the sheer scale of the deception he uncovers is just staggering. He realizes that this Mirage casino they're building in Nevada isn't just your standard mob joint. It is a dizzying maze of holding companies. We're talking Mirage Enterprises, owned by Desert Investment Partners, which is owned by Southwestern Financial Services, which ultimately funnels right into Black Ops funding. Following the money here is like navigating a massive puzzle that was custom-built to keep anyone from figuring out who's actually pulling the strings. And you quickly see exactly why that maze is so fiercely guarded. Look at the official sanitized police reports. Dolores Vega supposedly killed in a random robbery, and this insurance investigator, Elizabeth Crawford, supposedly dies in a tragic car crash. But the grim underlying truth? Both of these women were targeted for federal execution. I mean, this was straight-up witness elimination. They were ruthlessly silenced by a Treasury agent simply because they managed to photograph the casino's secure vault and were getting too close to that massive money laundering trail. Section 3. The Shadow Network. Untouchable Power. We need to talk about black operations. These are covert federal intelligence and military operations run entirely outside of congressional oversight. No official accountability whatsoever. And this is the true, chilling purpose of the Mirage Casino. It's not a mob front, it is a massive illegal laundering mechanism for the United States government itself. It operates completely in the margins, right in that gray area between what's legally authorized and what the state quietly decides is necessary to maintain global power. So where are all those laundered billions actually going? To put it into perspective, we're talking about unapproved intelligence operations, anti-communist activities in Latin America, and huge CIA operations in Southeast Asia. This is astronomical wealth moving through entirely off-the-books channels that Congress can't track and definitely hasn't approved. And honestly, it completely explains why federal agents are willing to execute American citizens without a second thought. They're protecting this massive secret network. Section 4. The Puppet Master. Who is Carmen Vega? Okay, so this brings us to the ultimate question of the whole story. Who is Carmen Vega? Who is this mysterious blonde woman who walked into Mickey's Diner, handed Jack an envelope full of cash, and kicked off this entire violent chain of events? Well, brace yourselves because Carmen Vega does not exist. If you look at her declassified personal file, her real name is Eleanor Margaret Vega. Recruited into the OSS way back in 1941, she eventually transitioned into an elite CIA fixer. Her official specializations are literally listed as interrogation, asset management, and threat elimination. And her psych profile, it notes an immoral efficiency and a total lack of emotional constraints. You guys, she wasn't some grieving sister looking for justice. She is an elite intelligence operative, and she was actually running the entire shadow network herself. It's absolutely wild how expertly she manipulated everyone. Throughout the 1950s, Eleanor uses federal resources to build this massive private shadow network. But by 1957, she gets a little too independent, too powerful, and the government decides they need to shut her down. So, what's her genius countermove? In 1958, she invents the Carmen Vega persona and hires Jack Malone. She knew he was a desperate, disgraced investigator, and she used him entirely as a pawn to expose the mid-level government agents who were moving against her. She literally orchestrated his entire investigation from day one just so she could negotiate her own disappearance with full immunity, completely leaving Jack to take the fall. Section 5. The Dead Man's Hand, the Final Ultimatum. When the dust settles, the federal government forces this agonizing bargain onto Jack to keep their dark secrets buried. It's the ultimate ultimatum. On one side, you have complicity. All Jack has to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement, pocket a huge pile of settlement money, pretend none of this ever happened, and just walk away free. On the other side, conscience. Refuse the deal, leak the undeniable proof of the shadow government to the press, and face decades in a federal penitentiary for violating the Espionage Act. And this is where Jack's ultimate realization really hits hard. Some prices are too high to pay, even when you're the one getting paid. He realizes that if he signs that NDA and stays quiet, he is literally making himself complicit in institutional murder. He refuses to just let the deaths of Dolores Vega and Elizabeth Crawford go unanswered. So he chooses his conscience over comfort, knowing full well how devastating the personal cost is going to be. And wow, that cost is severe. 7 years. That is how long Jack Malone is sentenced to serve in a federal prison. He is convicted under the Espionage Act simply for making sure those documents got published by the LA Times. The massive machinery of the government just keeps on churning, but Jack finally played his last card. The really haunting message of this story is about the slow, often painful necessity of accountability. The truth is basically the only weapon that works against massive institutional power, even if it doesn't change the system overnight. Jack's sacrifice doesn't magically dismantle the shadow government, right? Eleanor still escapes to run new operations, the Black Ops keep going, but the truth is finally out there in the public eye. It forces congressional hearings, it leaves a permanent mark. Jack learns that sometimes giving up your freedom in service to the truth is the only way to actually live. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy, lingering question. When institutional power literally writes the rules of the game, what is the true price of holding the dead man's hand? Does choosing the truth mean you actually win, or does it just mean you chose the right way to lose? I really want you to think about that heavy burden of truth and complicity as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive gave you a fascinating new perspective on the story. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll catch you next time.